Hello, my lovely anatomists and physiologists. We are back and this time looking at respiratory capacities, but notice we still have our diagram showing out those respiratory volumes that we just finished with. Now, when we talk about a respiratory capacity, what we're asking is, what is the capacity? How much air can the lung hold? So a minute ago, when we talked about volume, that's more like how much air can the lung move. Now we're saying like how much air can the lung hold? How much air can the lung hold? And so we can also write these out as equations if you super love equations, or we can just write them out in words so we can think about them either way. So let's look first at what's called your total lung capacity. So the total lung capacity is including all of the volumes. So this is the air that you can possibly move, as well as the air that stays resident in the lung, that kind of old air. So I'm going to put like new air in quotations and old air in quotations when we talk about total lung capacity. So this is the plus whatever's left is all of the things. And we see that this has an average of about 42 to 6,000, 4,200 to 6,000 milliliters. 4,200 to 6,000 milliliters is like our healthy range, expected range for total lung capacity. So remember, this is both like the air that you're moving, bringing it in, as well as the air that's already present in the lung. Because remember, you're not exhaling a good portion of that air all the time, right? When we look at vital capacity is more talking about movable air. So vital capacity is more talking about movable air, meaning what you can inhale and what you can exhale. So we can think about this as our tidal volume. We can think about this plus our inspiratory reserve volume. We can think about this as also our expiratory reserve volume. So vital capacity is all that you can inhale and all that you can exhale, both during like quiet and forced breathing. Now this one has sort of a range of, I think, 4,000 to 5,000 milliliters. When we look at the residual volume, they've used the purple color in our capacities and over here in our volumes. So they're highlighting that when we talk about vital capacity, it doesn't include the air that's old in the lung. It doesn't include the old air in the lung. And we'll see approximately, let's see, 30% of the air in the lung is that residual volume. So that is not figured into the vital capacity. The term inspiratory capacity to me is pretty straightforward. It's talking about what can you inhale. So inspiratory capacity would be your tidal volume plus your IRV, inspiratory reserve volume. So this is the total you can inhale. And when we talk about the functional residual capacity, this is like your typical, I'm going to call this your typical old air or stale air, leftover air. Most of us are not walking around going, right? Most of the time we're doing that quiet breathing. And so the functional residual capacity is talking about like typically you have more than that 30% residual volume. You typically have this additional air that you're not exhaling. So that's what is your functional residual capacity. We could talk about that also as your ERV plus your residual volume, your RV, if you wanted to. So that's the air that's typically in your lung. And this is important. So if we flip back to earlier conversation, if we go back and we look at our conducting portion, which was the nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, we can, and into the bronchial tree, we can talk about our conducting portion as being anatomical dead space, meaning no gas exchange is happening here. So it's not involved in gas exchange. And when we take a look, as we get into the deeper portion of the respiratory tract, as we get into the bronchial tree, so now we have our model that's showing our trachea and our primary bronchi and our lobar bronchi and our segmental bronchi, and then of course not in the diagram, the bronchioles. Getting into that bronchial tree, this is where you're going to get some of that residual volume of air. This is where you're going to get some of that functional residual capacity, that holding of air. So when we talk about like bringing in fresh air, it's mixing with some air that's still in that space. When we look at the alveoli, we don't expect to have dead space because this is our respiratory portion, but we will see what's described as alveolar dead space. And this is like your alveoli that are not functioning, non-functioning alveoli. And what we'll see happening is we'll have those capillaries. Remember those capillary sphincters? We talked about them as resource allocation masters. So they're going to redirect blood flow towards those functioning alveoli instead of towards those non-functioning alveoli. So we should still get a good amount of gas exchange or a little bit of compensation for that. So we will see this description used as well. Okay. Up next, we're ready to talk about the regulation of the respiratory rate. So stay tuned. As always, take care of yourselves and each other.